Welcome. This video we're going to discuss about enigmas of the English alphabet. Why enigmas? My name is Alvaro J. Alves-Milho and I'm the author of the book Enigmas of the English Alphabet. I wrote this book based on my experiences as a foreign language speaker living in the United States. Now, let me tell you about my story and how I started looking into this area and eventually ended up writing Enigmas of the English Alphabet. I am a software engineer who migrated to the United States 30 years ago. In 1998, I moved to Philadelphia and I started working for an international company. Now, at that time, even though I had tried to improve my pronunciation for years, I was still uncomfortable with it. And I had a thick Spanish accent that people noticed immediately. So my pronunciation was more like, "Good morning, how are you? I am glad to meet you." And it wasn't so bad, but it was still I was not happy with it, and I was I had doubts many times how to pronounce this particular word, etc. Well, back then, when I was in Philadelphia, uh, what happened one day, I decided to do some local tourism. If you have ever played the Monopoly board game, you remember that there are four railroad squares. Well, one of them is the Reading Railroad. Well, to me, there's always been the Reading Railroad, and I knew that it was from Pennsylvania. So that particular day, I went to the railroad station, to the Reading Railroad, and I asked for. Um, Actually, I was in the market, and I was asking people, where is the Reading Railroad or the Reading Station? And one person looked at me and he looked a little sad, and he basically corrected me and he told me, it is not reading, it's Reading, Reading Railroad. And I was shocked because to me, reading has always been pronounced reading, right? From the word read, and in present tense, reading. Of course, I always wonder why it was called the Reading Railroad, but that's a different story. So I turned around and I asked this person, why? What are the rules? Why is this word pronounced reading when it's written R-E-A-D-I-N-G? And he looked at me and he said, I don't know, but that's the way it is. Of course, that's the way it is. And he didn't know, and I didn't know either. So I wanted to find out. I wanted to know what the rules are. So the first thing I did was to send an email to Merriam-Webster, to the editor, asking them, what are the rules? How do you decide how to write the words in order to reflect a particular sound? Um, it took a few months, but eventually someone replied to me. And basically they told me that they just follow what general readers do. And this was something that didn't make sense to me because I was used to a particular rule, to a particular logic in the way words are written, which in Spanish and in Latin languages there is a particular way. Um, so I was not happy with it, and I started looking around to see if there was any English course I could take that could explain how words are spelled. Uh, Since I was not getting answers regarding this particular subject, I decided to do my own research. So I found that English is not a regular language. In other words, there are no rules that determine how a word needs to be written, or if there are rules, they are so complicated or there are so many exceptions to them that are not really applicable. Now, like I said, this was a shock to me because I always thought that English had rules and I just didn't know them. But I continued my research and I found that there were rules actually that were used by the old English scribes, but most people are unfamiliar with them. Right? That these are rules that, for example, determine why you would put two consonants in between two vowels and things like that. However, many people are not familiar with these rules, and even though they are not fully applicable today, um, they explain how some of the words were created and take a little bit of the mystery away from the spelling of each word. So there were rules used by the English scribes that created a spelling which was modified when later when the Norman invasion of England introduced the use of French. French was used as an official language and it lasted for almost 4 centuries until the time of the Middle English when English was retaken. And there was another big event called the Great Vowel Shift, in which the pronunciation of vowels changed in a particular way. Now, these events, of course, are well known and they are out there. There's a lot of people written this about this. However, this is not widely known, and at least in my case and in many people that I know who speak English as a second language are completely unfamiliar with this. They don't know about this evolution. Now, we don't need to know this evolution except to know that there were changes that were never done in English that affected the spelling. And that's why English is not a regular language. Now, English not being a regular language creates a problem or created a problem. And this problem was identified by many important personalities in the past, including Benjamin Franklin, who said that if spelling is not reformed, our words will gradually cease to express sounds. They will only stand for things, as the written words do in the Chinese language. Now, let's consider for a moment what this statement by Benjamin Franklin really means. See, Chinese, which is an ideographic language, is not a alphabetic language. In Chinese, you need to learn 3 to 4,000 symbols to achieve functional literacy. And the total number of characters is in the tens of thousands. Now, this compared to the alphabetic writing, where you only need to learn the letters of the alphabet to be able to reproduce the sound of any word in the language. Right? So it's how many symbols you need to learn. Technically, in an alphabetic writing, you just need to learn the total number of letters that are in the alphabet or in the version for your language. While in the other extreme, a system like the Chinese language, you need to learn thousands of symbols in order to be able to read the language. Now, most European languages are regular, and they have specific rules and symbols defined in such a way that just by reading the letters, you are able to reproduce the associated sounds. So we can see that the dictionaries for these languages do not require an additional pronunciation guide for their words. You'll see in the illustration here, you can see a dictionary, an Italian dictionary. And in this Italian dictionary, you can see each letter written, and there is no pronunciation guide. You can just look at the word and read it. For example, credito, creditore, credo, credulità. Well, each word is already represented in a particular way. Now, English is very irregular, and this is evident by looking at an English dictionary and seeing the pronunciation guide added to each word. So let's take a look at the illustration here, and you're probably familiar with many English dictionaries. Let's see that word advocacy, and we can see that there are symbols here that are representing, for example, that E that is upside down basically represents a schwa, which is a sound that we'll talk about later. And you can see advocacy, right? I guess it's pronounced. But in this situation, I basically need to learn new symbols in order to reproduce the sound. So we have different symbols in addition to the letters that are used. And you can see that basically every word has a pronunciation guide. Now, the history of English is fascinating, and you can probably spend hours trying to understand all the different developments that affected the language. But the point is that English is a non-regular spelling. English has a non-regular spelling. So what are the consequences for students of English in general and for students of English as a foreign language? Well, let's first take a look at native students, right? Native students are already exposed to the different words and sounds of the language. So when they start to read, they basically already have that word or the sound of that word, and they are associating this particular spelling to that word. So half of the work is done there. And that's obviously true for any language, not just English, except for the fact that you have to learn each word basically as a different symbol. And it is not unusual to see native speakers still having problems with spelling at the age of 13. They are still not able to have good or correct spelling. Now, for students of foreign or students of English as a foreign language, what are the consequences? Besides not being immersed in the English language, many foreign language students are also used to specific rules and pronunciation rules and spelling rules in their languages, and may have an expectation that they're going to find something like that in English. So they may be trying to apply their own rules to the English spelling, which creates a big problem. So in the illustration here, you can see different spellings from different languages and how they use usually diacritic symbols to point the different sounds that are not part of the original Latin alphabet. So we can see that this is a big challenge And we can see it for the many different methods that have been created in order to learn English. And most of those methods have been created by English speakers who may not understand the foreign language student viewpoint. Basically, that there can be regularity and that you should be able to learn a set of rules in order to identify the sounds in a word, as opposed to learning each word independently. Now, a lot of these methods are based, and also pronunciation guides that we were looking at before, are usually based on the International Phonetic Alphabet, which is complicated and can take a long time to learn. Right? The International Phonetic Alphabet has 107 letters, and as you can see in this illustration, uh, they represent a lot of sounds, more than are needed really for English or for any language. So, Enigmas of the English alphabet provides a different approach, and it goes all over the history of English just to understand what happens, what were the basic developments in English, and explain what are the basic sounds and represent them in a way that is easy to understand. Phonics Sense is an online course that I created based on enigmas of the English alphabet. Uh, it is a new method that has been designed to help students of English as a second language to understand the most generalized basic vocalic sounds that are used in American English. Most of the vocalic sounds is where most of the confusion is in English. Um, there are also different consonant pronunciations, but they are more consistent in their representation. Vocalic sounds are the ones that are less consistent in their representation and that can be used in very many different ways. Phonics Sense identifies each of the basic vocalic sounds, giving the exact mouth position needed to pronounce them. This helps to reduce the overwhelm many students feel when learning English, as they now can identify the basic sounds and how they are used. With Phonics Sense, we review some basic concepts such as the alphabet, vowels, consonants, syllables, accent, long syllable, what is the schwa, and then we go over the evolution of English, going from Old English, the Norman influence, Middle English, the Great Vowel Shift, and English spelling reform. This provides enough background to understand how the different vowels are pronounced and represented. So we go over the short vowels, which is short A, short E, short E, short O, short U, the long vowels, long A, long E, long I, long O, long U. And then we compare the different sounds, the short A versus the long A, short A versus the long E, short E versus the long I, short O versus the long O, short U versus the long U, short E versus the long E. And then we go over the additional vowel sounds, which are the closed A or the closed O or the open O or the open U or and the vowels that are pronounced as a schwa. Once the different vocalic sounds are learned, then it provides exercises. For example, in the line that you see there, you can see that each of the sounds are separated by a diacritic symbol. For example, make sure you bring some water. I know how to do it now. Now, we use the current spelling, adding diacritic symbols, to make it easier to distinguish the actual sounds involved and also remembering them when we see the word again, instead of having to learn an additional layer that is not related to the original spelling. By completing the course, you will learn the following. How many vowel sounds are in use in English? Why are they only represented by 5 letters? What rules were in use when the original English words were first written? What is the most important vocalic sound used in English which is not represented in its writing? What is the exact mouth position that will let you pronounce the basic vocalic sounds and identify them easily in any word? Well, I hope you found this first video interesting and you will consider going to our Phonics Sense course. The information is below. And please like and share if you found it interesting. And contact me if you have any questions. Thanks. Bye.